Just, can everyone see that presentation?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Romanowski and Madam Chair and committee members for having me tonight. My name is Cameron Richardson. I'm the Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change with the town of Ajax. And today I will be talking about the Green Development and Environmental Design Guidelines. First, I'll be giving a brief introduction about the project. I will provide an update on where we currently sit in the process, and I will discuss next steps. And I'm having trouble. There we go. Might just be a little slow. As a brief background, in September of 2019, town of Ajax declared a climate emergency to acknowledge the impacts of climate change and commit to proactively mitigating and adapting to those impacts. In 2021, through council motion, the town also endorsed corporate and community GHG emissions reduction targets, as well as joined the global campaign known as the City's Race to Zero. In our community and across Durham region, it's important to note that buildings are second only to transportation as the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So a municipal green standard for new development and redevelopment within the town would be vital in addressing the climate change emergency and achieving the targets that have been endorsed. The guidelines themselves are identified as an implementation priority in both the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan, as well as this term of council's strategic plan. The guidelines are also included in Ajax's current official plan, where it speaks to establishing the guidelines to promote development and site alteration in the built environment that protects, enhances, is compatible with, and connects to the natural features within the Greenland system. So what are the Green Development and Environmental Design Guidelines? Well, essentially, they will establish sustainability-related design guidelines and performance measures for new development and redevelopment within the town of Ajax. The guidelines have three main objectives, which are: 1, to prepare, mitigate, and adapt to climate change; 2, to protect and enhance natural features; and 3, to implement higher building standards and development practices within the town. The project is being completed in 3 phases. Phase 1 was background research and analysis. Phase 2 was drafting of the guidelines and associated metrics, and phase 3 will be to finalize those guidelines. I'll expand in more detail on the 3 phases in the slides that follow. We are currently in phase 2 of the project, with phase 3 anticipated to be completed in Q2 of next year. When the project began, the first step was to initiate a project steering committee. This steering committee consisted of representatives from various departments at the town of Ajax, in order to provide their knowledge and expertise to the project, as well as to review key deliverables and provide feedback throughout the process. The steering committee had representation from every section within planning and development services, as well as representation from operations and environmental services and the CAO's office. Phase 1 was completed earlier this year in July with the release of the phase 1 report known as the Background Research and Policy Review Report. That report is included as attachment 1 in the staff report. At the end of that phase, we also launched the project In My Opinion, or IMO webpage. The phase 1 report provided a summary of the policies, plans, and strategies related to climate change, sustainability, and green building standards. It reviewed all of these policies and plans at all levels of government, federal, provincial, regional, and local, as well as guidelines related to sustainability that have been released by conservation authorities. In summary, the report highlighted 4 key directions that were to guide the development of the draft guidelines. Those key directions were as follows: 1, watershed management and best practices; 2, protection and enhancement of the natural landscape; 3, architecture and building standards; and 4, urban design and infrastructure. After phase 1 was completed in July, phase 2 was initiated, and phase 2 had 2 key deliverables. The first was to prepare a draft of the guidelines and associated performance metrics, which is complete, and those draft guidelines and metrics are attached as attachment 2 in the staff report. The next deliverable would be to solicit valuable feedback on those proposed guidelines from all stakeholders. All feedback received will be reviewed and incorporated into the final guidelines as appropriate, and that will take place in phase 3. I just wanted to provide a little bit more detail on the draft guidelines and metrics themselves. The draft guidelines consist of the following sections: an overview of the guidelines, including the overarching goals and objectives, an outline of the standards and any potential applicable future incentives that may apply, the proposed criteria, metrics, and performance measures, the proposed application submission requirements, as well as an outline of a recommended implementation strategy. So essentially, how would these draft guidelines and metrics be incorporated into our existing development application review process? The draft guidelines and metrics were developed based on the results of that phase 1 report that I mentioned earlier, and in close consultation with the project steering committee. Early consultation had identified that it would be best to organize the metrics into themes, or what we are calling impact categories. And the impact categories that we have identified are as follows: air, energy, natural assets and habitat, waste and materials, water, and other sustainability initiatives. And here we can see a bit more detail on the impact categories themselves. So you can see the impact categories I mentioned across the top of this chart, and down below all of the metrics that fall within those impact categories. And I just wanted to note a few things. First, it's important to note that these metrics are not always exclusive to just one impact category. They often have multiple benefits that bridge impact categories. So we place the metrics under the one specific impact category to help simplify the process and avoid any duplication or confusion that may arise throughout the development application review process. As an example, we can see under the air impact category here that we have placed EV charging, and that's mostly due to the benefits that it provides in improving air quality. However, we all know that this metric obviously has wide-reaching benefits across multiple impact categories, but we wanted to place it under one impact category that made the most sense. Secondly, it's important to note that identifying these metrics requires a very fine balance. If you have too many metrics, the process can become very cumbersome and time-consuming for both town staff and development proponents, and become very difficult to implement. If you don't have enough metrics, you run the risk of losing the effectiveness of the guidelines as an important tool to achieve the stated goals and objectives. The project steering committee and staff feel that we are proposing metrics that were identified using a very realistic and balanced approach. A little bit more about the metrics. So in terms of municipal green standards, we often hear of what we call the tiered approach. And that means we have separate tiers of metrics, which can be mandatory metrics. So those have to be met during the application process, or voluntary metrics, which are not mandatory and not required, however, encouraged. So these voluntary metrics are aspirational targets, and we try to encourage them, and they can be encouraged through incentives. And incentives often fall within two categories: either financial incentives, things like development charge rebates that we see with the Toronto Green Standard, for example, or non-financial incentives, things like improved staff support, potential for expedited review, improved marketing of the sustainable development, and potentially even annual design awards. It's also important to note that metrics are applied depending on the type of development that is proposed. So we will have separate metrics for something like a low density residential proposal versus a mid to high density residential or non-residential proposal. What are our next steps in phase 2? Our next steps will be to consult on the draft guidelines, and this consultation will follow the outreach consultation plan that was developed in phase 1 with the project steering committee and the consultant. We will be hosting a virtual public information center, and associated survey and feedback form will be available on the Project IMO project page. We will also be undertaking targeted consultation with Region of Durham staff and committees, our partner conservation authorities, as well as the building industry themselves. Once phase 2 consultation is completed, we can initiate phase 3, which is anticipated in January of next year, with a key deliverable being the finalizing of the guidelines based on the input received. The final guidelines will include clear, innovative, and implementable policies and performance metrics that we can readily integrate into our development application review process. And it is anticipated that the final guidelines will be brought back to this committee in April of next year. In conclusion, the Green Development and Environmental Design Guidelines exemplify a very important step in promoting sustainable development in the town of Ajax, which will be vital in addressing the climate change emergency, as well as substantially reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the town of Ajax. And as always, the town of Ajax will continue to exemplify strong leadership in environmental sustainability. And with that, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them now.
Thank you very much for that report. Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's been late, so I'll make it quick. So thank you for the report, Mr. Richardson. You ended it very aptly by saying strong leadership in environmental sustainability. And this is where my question is going. I feel like we started this program many moons ago, and we're still even in the infancy of this entire program. Yet, if I'm not mistaken, Whitby passed the whole thing part and parcel like last year. So I'm wondering, like, why are we so delayed when to your point, it's true, we were leaders in environmental sustainability and we kind of fell off. We kind of lost our eye on the ball, so to speak. So I was wondering if you could answer just why do we fall behind Whitby on this, for example?
Through Madam Chair to you, Regional Councillor Lee. In fact, the town of Whitby wasn't the first within Durham Region to have green standards. Clarington and Pickering both have sustainable guidelines that they follow, and they are being implemented to different degrees. And in fact, Clarington and Pickering are in the process of updating their guidelines as we speak. This project, as detailed in section 2.1 of my staff report, was initiated in late 2017 and was subsequently put on pause in 2018 for various reasons. When I joined the town of Ajax in November of last year, it was top priority to start the project up again, which occurred in November of last year. So we are following the work plan that was put in place to complete it within the timelines and complete it within the identified timelines in council strategic plan. So I will say that I don't think it shows a lack of leadership in sustainability. Since 2017, the town has really been a leader in sustainability with our council motions, the only municipality within Durham Region to join the city's Race to Zero, which has got some great coverage, obviously, over the last week or so. And we also had pushed forward some other plans that took priority, like the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan, which still stands alone as a very technical and forward-thinking plan, where these guidelines were identified within that Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan as an action item. So I think staff have started the project and will finish it and complete it within the timelines associated with the strat plan.
And I appreciate that. And I meant ultimately, no offense. I guess my point was ultimately, I want to continue to be leaders in environmental sustainability. I want us to be, the vanguard. And, I want to stop hearing, quite frankly, from staff that, it was something that Jade started. Jade. I love Jade to death. Like, she's the greatest. But I want people to start talking about Cam and what Cam's doing. What Cam's doing is drive us forward. And I think you're doing a great job so far. And, as far as council goes, we've written a lot of checks right now that I hope we can cash, because we did declare a climate emergency. We were recognized with the Race to Zero. And at this point, I just hope that, a lot of our decisions will have to be environmentally focused. And I look forward to that. My last question, Cam, is we had passed the motion regarding an environmental reserve, I think is the best way to put that. Would that be reflected in this report at all? Is there any kind of movement on that?
Through Madam Chair to you, Regional Councillor Lee, you're correct. As part of the greenhouse gas reduction targets that were set through motion earlier this year, there was also the motion to investigate the feasibility of starting a climate change reserve fund. Planning staff, including Director Romanowski and myself, have met with finance to discuss the starting of that fund and come up with some possible ways in which we could do that. That reserve fund currently sits with finance staff, who will be bringing a report back. There was no timeline associated with that motion, but they will be bringing a report back based on that.
Perfect. And again, can't say enough. Like since you joined the team, you've been really on the file. You've been very open. You've been very available to me, and I'm sure to all council to answer these kind of questions. And I imagine as more pressure comes to elected officials to find these environmental solutions, we'll be leaning on you and planning more and more. So I just want to thank you for your efforts. Thank you.